The BBC Gary Lineker drama comes to an end as BBC bosses issue an apology and surrender to the woke mob. Yes, as predicted over the last couple of days, a lot of us knew that the BBC will eventually have to do this. So, Gary Lineker is going back to work, and the BBC have accepted that they're going to have to review the guidelines. So, in this video, we're going to talk about the reality behind this drama, and obviously from Gary Lineker's side, as well as the BBC bosses. But the fact is that, of course, we know that Gary Lineker is a leftist, virtue signaling, wokey weirdo that has repeatedly been tweeting things that are political, even though he's not really, he doesn't have a political hat when it comes to his BBC job. At the same time, having said that, this whole thing was a creation of the BBC. The whole scandal, from the beginning, in the first place, it was the BBC's fault in reality because of the double standards of these rules and the inconsistency of enforcement of these rules. So, when it comes to Tim Davie, who is the boss of the BBC, he has been a little bit problematic over the last few years since he got the job under Boris Johnson, and he hasn't really been able to do a proper crackdown on impartiality and professionalism. At the same time, we've already seen hypocrisy a lot from BBC presenters, but the BBC bosses are to be responsible. So right now, they created a situation where they essentially suspended Gary Lineker for a little bit, but because of the pressure, they had to suspend him, and because of another pressure, they had to cave in. And then now they're going to have to review the guidelines to make sure that they create some sort of consistent framework. So you can't really have people like Attenborough and others doing whatever they want. And then you're going to have the news reporters who have to have actual impartiality. But then you're going to have sports presenters. So you need to create the framework for, as the BBC, to say, for example, anybody who is not a part of the BBC news program, then fine, you can do whatever you want. They can choose that. They can pick one. But if they want to basically stop everybody in the BBC, all employees and contractors, from having political opinions, then they're going to have to make a blanket policy and actually enforce it. That's what they have to do. At the same time, we had Andrew Castle, who's close friends with Gary Lineker. When this whole thing was happening and the BBC was surrendering, he actually came out and said that, actually, I spoke to Gary, and privately, he has admitted that that was wrong. He himself, Gary Lineker, has admitted that he went a bit too far with that tweet. So for those, in case you don't remember, or you haven't been following it for some reason, Gary Lineker tweeted against Suella Braverman's migration bill, saying that, this is basically the language of the 1930s Germany. So he himself, apparently, according to Andrew Castle, his close friend, he actually admitted that that tweet was a step too far, but he didn't say it publicly. So at the same time, that was too late because the BBC have already made their decision to beg him to come back. So it's not really looking good for the BBC. So they said, everyone recognizes this. It has been a difficult period for staff, contributors, presenters, and most importantly, our audiences. I apologize for this, according to Tim Davie. The potential confusion caused by the grey areas of the BBC's social media guidance that was introduced in 2020 is recognised. I want to get matters resolved and our sport content back on air. Impartiality is important to the BBC. It is also important to the public. The BBC has a commitment to impartiality in its charter and a commitment to freedom of expression. That is a difficult balancing act to get right, where people are subject to different contracts and on-air positions with different audiences and social media profiles. Why is it that a lot of us knew this in 2020 when they came up with this blanket policy, that there are different contracts, there are different type of presenters and contributors and those who just come and go and actual employees? But it took them until now to realize this. It's your fault. You guys created the monster, the Frankenstein monster that is Gary Lineker, so he's allowed to do whatever he wants. Now you need him, so you have to beg him to come back. He couldn't even find a presenter to fill in when he was away a couple of days ago for Match of the Day. It's absolutely embarrassing for the BBC. Basically, they said the BBC's social media guidance is designed to help manage these sometimes difficult challenges, and I'm aware that there is a need to ensure that the guidance is up to its task. It should be clear, proportionate, and appropriate. Accordingly, we are announcing a review led by an independent expert reporting to the BBC on its existing social media guidance, with a particular focus on how it applies to freelancers outside news and current affairs. The BBC and myself are aware that Gary is in favour of such review. Well, that's good to know, guys. Shortly, the BBC will announce who will conduct that review. Whilst this work is undertaken, the BBC's current social media guidance remains in place. Gary is a valued part of the BBC. Hang on. So wait, if while they're doing the review, if the current guidance is still in place, does that mean that today or tomorrow, if Gary Lineker tweets again, you're going to have to suspend him? It's so bad. They don't even know what they're doing. So there's no good side in this. You got Gary Lineker and all the leftists doing whatever they want. You got the BBC bosses being inconsistent. They're doing a review. They're changing the furniture. And they're keeping the existing one. Oh, just probably suspend it for the next few days so you know exactly what you're doing. Because imagine if Gary Lineker, if I were Gary Lineker, I would literally go on Twitter right now and start tweeting anti-Tory stuff. Just for the sake of it. Anti-Brexit, anti-Tory, anti-everything, anti-Trump. Just to see what they can do. Because they're going to have to uphold it. It is still in place. The current guidance is still in place. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to suspend me. So it is absolutely fascinating how the BBC completely lost this battle. Anyway, we have so many news stories for you guys. If you're new to the channel, we come to you guys every half an hour. From the ULEZ updates in London and City Khan to the latest in issues when it comes to Insulate Britain and eco-militants, as well as the latest news stories from Scotland and the SNP leadership election. And of course, one of the biggest updates, which is the potential banking crash, the Silicon Valley Bank that is being essentially bailed out without being bailed out. If you want to find out what's going on, subscribe to the channel. I'm Mahyar, Tousi, and we are the media.